Hey everybody, it's your human anatomy and physiology teacher, Mr. Poser, and today we are starting a new unit on the digestive system. This is one of the last organ systems that we're going to cover in this class, and there's a lot to go over. There's a lot of interesting parts of the digestive system, and today we're going to go over an overview of what it does and what that's all about. So let's get started. This is a kind of a wordy introduction and a wordy overview of what the digestive system is all about, but it does a really good job kind of like summing it up a little bit. So it says right here that the human digestive system is a complex series of organs and glands that processes food. Okay, you might already know that. In order to use the food that we eat, our body has to break food down into smaller molecules that it can process. It also has to excrete waste. So something you may or may not have heard me talk about before is that the main job of what's called your metabolism, which you might have heard of before, like, oh, I have a really high metabolism, I can eat like 10 pizzas or whatever. You might have heard the word metabolism, but metabolism is really, I don't have a definition here, but it's all the chemical reactions that occur in the body. The totality of all the reactions that occur in an organism, right? So your metabolism includes not only breaking molecules down, breaking your food and other molecules down into smaller ones, but it also involves taking those smaller molecules and building new molecules from what you ate. So literally, when I say this, I mean it very literally. You are what you eat. The organic matter that you put in your body is broken down into smaller components and then rebuilt into something that makes up literally you, that your cells use. Okay, and so your digestive system plays a really, really big role. Pretty much every living thing has some kind of digestion that it does. And let's find out what humans use it for. Hey, the digestive system, there's two other words for it. You might hear me refer to it as the GI tract throughout the rest of these videos. So it has two other names. It's called the alimentary canal or the gastrointestinal tract. And gastro, that Latin prefix means stomach. Intestinal, well, it refers to intestines, right? So the GI tract is what I often refer to the digestive system as. And really what it is, it's a big tube. That's it. Well, there's a couple of organs that deposit things into the tube, but that's what your digestive system is. It's a big old tube, right? And this is, in fact, if you really, really want to get into it, this is the first organ system that kind of starts to develop after conception, right? So I'll have a fun fact for you later on about the very first organ that forms after conception. But one of the first shapes that the clump of cells that eventually will become you takes is like a cylinder, it's like a tube, and the opening of that tube and that cylinder is what eventually becomes your alimentary canal, or what we would call the GI lumen, the opening that the rest of your body is pretty much built around. So it's kind of crazy. But yeah, it's a tube, right? And it extends from the mouth all the way to the anus, and that is the digestive system or the gastrointestinal tract. Okay, more of an overview here. What does the digestive system do? Nutrients from food are absorbed into the cells of the digestive system. So not only does your digestive system break down food into smaller molecules that the rest of your body can use, its second job is to, well, it has to absorb those molecules. It has to bring them into the rest of your body so that you can use it. Your cells can use it to make proteins, to use it for energy, use it for whatever. Yeah, so it has to absorb a lot of that stuff. And we're going to talk about the 5 main functions here in just a second. Another thing about the GI tract is that it's lined with mucus-coated epithelium from start to finish. And if you haven't learned about tissues, epithelium is a similar kind of tissue. It's layers of cells, right? So epithelium, there's 4 different layers within the GI tract, and each one of those serves a different purpose. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, why is there mucus all along the GI tract? Well, a couple things. It has to moisten what you eat so that it can be broken down more easily, and so that nutrients can be absorbed from what you eat more easily. So isn't that a nice word? Mucus. Nice thing to think about, right? So here it is. The histology of the digestive tube, or the GI tract as I call it. There's four distinct layers. The innermost layer is called the mucosa, just like I was saying, mucus, right? It's the innermost, and it's the epithelium that faces the lumen, and the lumen is the space where the food passes through. Okay, so like I said, the inner part of that tube, that first clump of cells starts to form, that eventually becomes the intestinal lumen or the GI tract lumen. And the layer of cells surrounding that lumen is called the mucosa layer. Okay. Just past the mucosa, the second innermost layer is the submucosa, which is a layer of connective tissue that contains nerves and blood vessels, right? So, um, your digestive tract needs blood, it needs oxygen, it needs whatever else in order to do its job, and it needs, senses, right? So that's where the nerves and the blood vessels come in. And then following the submucosa, the second outermost layer is a layer of smooth muscle. And there's usually two perpendicular layers of smooth muscle. And we're going to talk about what that smooth muscle does momentarily because it has a super important role in the digestive system. And if you recall, smooth muscle is the kind of muscle that does not require voluntary action, right? So you don't have to tell with your brain your smooth muscle to contract like I'm telling my skeletal muscle to contract right now to project my voice, right? But that's neither here nor there. And then the outermost layer of the digestive tube is called the serosa, which is a thin outer membrane covering up all the other three layers of the tube. Okay? So there are 5 different processes involved in the digestive system. There's 5 different activities, and those are ingestion, mechanical breakdown, chemical breakdown, absorption, and of course, last but not least, defecation. All right, and that's what we're going to get into with the rest of our video today are these 5 different terms. So the first thing that your digestive tract has to do is obviously ingest food. It has to take in food through the mouth. And not only that, but it has to propel that food through the rest of the tube. Okay. So not only you can use your skeletal muscles to put food in your mouth, but right once it's in your mouth and you swallow it, it's smooth muscles' job to get that food throughout the rest of your tube. Right, and that's what we refer to as propulsion. And there's 2 methods to propulsion. One is called deglutition, which is, as I said, is voluntary swallowing. Is controlled by skeletal muscle, okay, and that's going to force food from the oral cavity back into the esophagus, which we'll talk about in the next video. And then the second one, this is actually really important. I'm going to highlight it and underline it here. It's called peristalsis, which is waves of contraction of smooth muscle in the organ walls. Right, peristalsis is kind of a wave of contraction. Right, so when you are running low on toothpaste. Okay, you got your favorite toothpaste and it's running kind of low. What do you do with that toothpaste? Do you just kind of like squeeze it and then hope some toothpaste comes out? Like no, you kind of take your fingers and you kind of form a wave of motion, kind of push whatever's left in that tube of toothpaste out to the front, right? And it's kind of weird to picture that, but that is kind of how peristalsis works. You have a wave of contraction that's going to push that toothpaste in the desired direction. And peristalsis is what your GI tract does, and in fact your urinary tract too, in order to move that stuff from one place to another through that tube. Okay, so once you swallow your food, okay, your esophagus, your stomach, and the rest of your GI tract, that smooth muscle layer in your GI tract, its job is to kind of squeeze and smooth the rest of that in waves like a tube of toothpaste, and that's called peristalsis. Okay. The second process that happens in the digestive system is mechanical digestion. And mechanical is referring to actual physical digestion. And that's breaking down food into a fine pulp. Isn't that a nice word too? Pulp. And it physically prepares food for chemical digestion. Okay, and this might seem a little foreign, but it's not at all. Because the first form of mechanical digestion, or in fact the first form of digestion that occurs once food enters your mouth, is called mastication, which is a fancy word for chewing. And obviously you do that with your teeth, and we're gonna talk about that in a future video. Mechanical digestion also involves your tongue, mixing it around and kind of pressing your food and mixing it with saliva. which is another form of chemical digestion. We'll talk about that in a sec. Your stomach has muscle. It's actually very muscular, and it kind of pulverizes whatever is in there and turns what you swallowed into this kind of liquid. We're going to look at that in our next video too. But your stomach churns food. It actually kind of like breaks it down by contracting the smooth muscle walls. And then finally, segmentation, which happens in the large and small intestines, is mechanical digestion that mixes food with digestive enzymes. Okay? So mechanical digestion, food is broken down physically into smaller parts. And then, of course, chemical digestion is when we really break it down into the tiniest pieces that we can, using chemicals, obviously. So chemical digestion involves a series of catabolic steps where complex food molecules are broken into their chemical form. Large molecules become smaller monomers. Okay, so there's only so small, you can only break something physically so small into the smallest pieces. You can only get so small, right? But if you chemically digest it, you can break down things like starch into glucose. You can break down actin and myosin into their individual component amino acids with chemical digestion. And there's a series of enzymes in your stomach and in your, well, yeah, particularly in your stomach and in your mouth actually too, that will break down those larger molecules into smaller ones. Okay, so that's chemical digestion. Absorption, a super important one that I talked about before too. Not only do we have to break down the food, we have to absorb what we get from it. So absorption is absorbing the small nutrient molecules, vitamins, minerals, and water, and pass them to the bloodstream and the lymphatic system for distribution to the rest of the body. Right? So your body needs those nutrients, it needs that energy, it needs vitamins, minerals, water. And another job of the digestive system is to try and drop off, absorb whatever they got from their food, and drop it off into the bloodstream or into the lymph, so that the bloodstream and the lymphatic system can deliver that throughout the rest of the body. Super important. Okay, and then finally, whatever you're not going to use for nutrients, or whatever you can't break down, you eliminate in the form of feces, and that's called defecation. Okay, and that will be, oh, we got one more. Let's relate this back to homeostasis. The digestive system plays key roles in homeostasis, just like every other organ system. Food and water are brought in through the digestive system. Obviously, you need both of those to survive. Those are two of our 5 main survival needs, and waste is eliminated through the digestive system. Excretion or elimination of waste is one of your 7 life functions. 7 things you need to be able to do in order to be a living thing. And your digestive system does that for you. All right, that should be it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you next time.